Hello and welcome everybody to AFP. I am David Goss, joined by a usual suspect in Sean K. On today's show, we're obviously going to dig in to the MLS playoffs as well as look back on decision day. But we have a special conversation coming with the general manager of the first ever MLS NEXT Pro Cup champion, Wray. Sean knows him from his TFC days. I've known him for years from the youth soccer and development scene around North America. He came from Toronto to Columbus, and he won the first ever title overwhelmingly. His team led the league in both goals scored and least goals conceded, which is a pretty good way to go about it. We've got CPL playoffs and, of course, hashtag AskAFP. Sean, how does it feel to be sitting in the passenger seat?
Feels good. It feels nice. It feels like I got tons of room here. It just sort of like reach out, stretch, and we get to share a little bit of misery before we get into playoff talks. I texted you before saying this is going to be like 15 minutes of us just talking baseball off the hop, but we had a sad weekend for both of us.
It will be the last time I care about baseball for the year, and it'll be the last time I watched it because I have to admit at this point, I'm just a Mets fan. I don't love the sport all the way through, but I love the Mets, and I love watching them win. I went to the game on Friday night. It was depressing, which is a experience that I have much in. So I was in my zone, to say the least. And then, obviously, I spent Sunday night in Orlando Airport for 5 hours while listening to the Mets game, which is arguably what some religions would consider hell if they had that as a breakdown, that specifically.
I had tickets for Game 3, but my series didn't even get there. So,
oh man, that's bad. For them to have been up by that much and for you to have tickets to Game 3 is rough.
It was one of those where I sent a message to my buddy being like, do you think they're going to first pitch at 1:00? Like, there's only going to be a couple games playing. Is it going to be 8? I had other plans. Who knew? And then all of a sudden it's like 8:05, 8:08. Oh gosh. And then just slowly slipping away. As a Toronto fan, it's something that comes very, very easy for us with the Maple Leafs, who love to choke. The Jays have done it. The Raptors have done it before. TFC have found moments to do that. It's a warm blanket. Both of us, I think.
You can't hang on. TFC's won at least one MLS Cup. They've won 2 Supporters Shields. They've won multiple Canadian championships. The Raptors won a championship, and the Blue Jays won a World Series.
93.
Okay, I haven't seen any of my teams win any titles. And what's worse, I will say that this is my trump card over everyone all the time, is I live in a city where the other fans win everything all the time. I'm a Jets fan.
You're a Jets fan. Oh, you're a Jets fan. Oh, because at least I'm a Giants fan, so I've gotten that there. So
no. There's no quarter for me. I am out and exposed at all times in the worst way possible. Because you came on these sad topics, I have to tell you at the start of last show, I drilled you for North London Derby stuff, so I apologize.
I heard it. And then I'm out Devang out in the Discord screen capping my chats with him. It's just outing me. It's bad, but I deserve it. The second I pressed send to Devang saying, hey, we're going to win this game, I knew we were going to lose. It was, I don't believe in other people's superstitions. I think it's garbage. But the second I do something, it is superstition. And it's just like, I did this. All of this is on me. So I apologize to any Spurs fans. It was my fault for shit talking Devang prior to the game.
As a fan of all losing teams, I never talk smack because I always assume my team will lose. So I can't even I don't even understand people that do it. I'll do it afterwards if my team wins somehow, but never beforehand. So we've got a packed show coming up, a lot to talk about. You mentioned the Discord. Before we get into the episode, we want everyone to know that you can go to patreon.com to support us. Sean, a lot of great stuff going on over there.
Yeah, I happened to, because it was a long weekend and there's Thanksgiving in Canada, all that stuff, I missed a few days on the Discord, and then I spent this morning going through it all, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's 50, 60, 70 messages just waiting for me, finding out that Devang's ripping me. It was a warm it's a warm environment, I swear, except for me. But no, the Discord's a great place, and once playoffs kick off, I think it's going to be really, really fun to get in there and be with a community that's gonna share fun moments with you, especially with a good chunk of Canadians who are in the Discord who don't really have a dog in the fight. So it'll be interesting.
They do not. We also are, of course, going to go straight into the World Cup. So there was a lot of talk this weekend about Alphonso Davies. I was actually on site covering the games while all of that was happening. So it was, sort of where I was getting all my news from on the Discord. So if you want to become a part of it, if you want to join us, go to patreon.com/afootballpodcast to support us today. Coming up after the break, we will dig into the MLS playoffs. Welcome back, everybody, to AFP. David Goss and Sean K with you as Devang Desai starts a new job today. So congratulations to Devang. I'm snapping. I'm sure Sean has something he does for his kid that's cheering without cheering, that he's silently doing in the background. We are so proud of him. We're so excited to have him back afterwards. A lot going on in the AFP family right now. We appreciate all of you that support us through all of it and join us for it. Let's start with Decision Day. Then we'll move into the playoffs. We've got the first round of the playoffs starting on Saturday morning, and then a full weekend plus Monday night of games. But Decision Day happened once again. Every game in the Eastern Conference kicking off at the same time, and then the Western Conference as well. Let's start, Sean, with Vancouver, of course. They controlled their own destiny. Really out of nowhere. 3 straight wins to close the year. Got them to a spot where go to Minnesota, win, and you were automatically in. But they lost 2-0 after I think there was a decent amount of confidence going into this game. What did you make of the way this went down? And then sort of what is the reaction now that the season's over?
It was really disappointing watching this match sort of happen. And I think the first goal really took the sails out of what the Whitecaps were trying to do. And it was just sort of like they got themselves this great spot. And I feel like this is sort of what the Whitecaps did all season, is that they got them to a point where it's like, okay, guys, prove it to us. And then they just came up short. They just have a real trouble sort of creating really good opportunities in front of goal. And I just feel like they just didn't have the gas to put them over. And once again, we've talked about it for so long that this team just might have been built a little too late. Injuries plagued them a little bit too much. And at the end of the season, we're sort of having that same conversation almost we had last year with them, where it's like they can rise to the occasion sometimes. They can do it. Can they take this momentum that they had into next season? I think it's a bit different this year. Am I wrong? Like, I feel like with the additions of a designated player that's come in and Kubas and sort of set themselves up, and now with a potential to bring another spot in, like they're in a better spot than they were last year, but it just sort of felt the exact same. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're 100% right. I think it's fair for the fans to be upset and frustrated that it happened again.
Yeah.
Where they left the work to be done later. But at the same time, I have a lot of confidence in what I saw being replicable and growing, because the pieces I think make more sense right now. And it's a stronger team. There's a higher floor. Vanni Sartini did an interview with us on ETR last week, and we asked him about mistakes that were made. And he said they got preseason wrong. They started the year, I think, 0-4. Yeah. And he straight up said, we got preseason wrong. We didn't know what COVID would be, so we started in Vancouver with no games. So we didn't play preseason games against MLS or Scandinavian or USL teams. When we got to the regular season, we were a step behind everyone else.
Yeah.
So already there, your hope is if they pick up, 2 points from the first 4 or 5 games of the season, they make the playoffs. So the hope is there's that learning process, but I do think there's too much good to walk away from all of it right now. Cavallini's going to be the big question mark. I asked the question, if he scores big goals, they get to the playoffs, does it change everything? He didn't do that in the end. Is it done? Is it over?
I think so. I don't know. I think the best Cavallini can do for this club is he's like a 12, 14 goal scorer. And you sort of already have that sitting there for cheaper in Brian White. So I don't know where he fits into it. It's Vancouver's like option to go ahead and do it. He's like, he doesn't have the cachet of being like, he's going to be a World Cup player, but he's not going to like get frequent minutes. So you can't really market him. So I don't know where his value is at a designated player value. Could they renegotiate? Maybe, but even that, it's like, once again, Brian White's the one who's stealing his minutes and is not like, is going to be playing for a lot cheaper. So I don't know where Cavallini would fit in this league, to be perfectly honest. I think he's sort of priced out. So I don't know. Do you think he sticks around? Like,
no, I agree with you. I mean, definitely not for the price he's on. And maybe he wants to stay in Vancouver and renegotiate and get longer term deal, whatever it is. It is going to be awkward because I swear, I'll bet you that Vancouver will promote him being on the World Cup roster because it'll be their only guy, right?
Yep.
He's going to be the only Vancouver guy on the World Cup roster. They'll have Alphonso Davies, right? There are other players that they can sort of, but I bet you that they promote it and then he doesn't come back, which is super awkward. I agree with you on Brian White. I think you did see his deficiencies. Like Brian White, his feet are not great. If the ball's in the air, he could cushion a header down cleaner than he could probably play the pass with his foot. And his movement's good. Ryan Gauld reads him well. He's clearly a good MLS player. Great deal for what they got. I still think that's probably where I'd add if I was replacing that DP spot. But you could convince me center back as well with Vancouver. So they come up, and I would say even in the Minnesota game, I thought they were the better team the first 20 minutes. They put one of their chances away. They're up 1-0. They probably move into the playoffs. They didn't take advantage because I don't think that high level finishing was there. Minnesota, as you said, that first goal takes the wind out of their sails. Then they move on from there. So that means Vancouver's not going to the playoffs, but we do have our bracket set. We do know we'll start on Saturday at noon Eastern time with Red Bulls hosting Cincinnati. I'll be at that game. I will also be at the Montreal-Orlando game. So if there's any people in Montreal listening, hit me up. I'd love to meet. I'd love to say hi, whatever it is. I'm excited. I haven't been to Stade Saputo since I think 2019, maybe 2018. So it's been a little while for me. I'm really excited about the playoffs. Sean, what jumps out to you when you look at this bracket? Let's say, what are you most excited about either happening or potentially happening?
I think on the west side, I'm really excited about the Galaxy Nashville game. I think that there's something really so interesting. Like, we've talked about the Galaxy so much this podcast, and I think it's obviously like Greg Vanney, but I don't know what I'm to get with that team. And you've got that salivating fixture after the fact with the Derby, but I think Nashville might be I don't know if we call it the hipster choice, but I feel like the pathway is pretty good for them right now. And I know they have to play LAFC, but there's something about them right now. They can score whenever they want. They're defensively sound. I like them as a playoff team. It's sort of similar to like sort of a smaller version of Philadelphia where they can score and score and score, but they're also like incredibly good on the back. So I don't know, that's the game that I could see. It could go 3-0. It could go 5-4. Like, anything can happen in that Galaxy Nashville game. That's the game that excites me the most on the West. And then the East, what do you think?
Wait, were you talking about Nashville can score or Galaxy can score?
Nashville. I think Nashville can when they get in a good game. I think that they can.
Okay. They have scored one goal in their last 4 games, but
we're talking yes. Fair. Yeah, but everyone goes on heaters, but they still have the skill to score anytime, any chance. And the LA Galaxy are not a good defensive team.
No, they are not a good defensive team. That I agree with you. Now, what will be interesting is there's probably a pretty good chance that the Galaxy they might have 75% possession. I was trying to think of a number. I'm pretty sure they went to Nashville a few weeks ago on the road and had 65 plus possession. So it'll be unique. It'll be interesting. For me in the East, honestly, I think all of the matchups are fun. I'm really excited for Red Bull Cincinnati. Since he's open, they are high scoring. They cannot defend. So it's really, I think, going to fall on can the Red Bull guys finish. But I think it's going to be a high speed game. It's going to be fun. The one that stands out to me is NYCFC Miami. And I'm pretty high on Miami if Pozuelo is healthy.
Yeah.
The numbers don't look great because early season, Miami was a mess defensively. I mean, they gave up 5 goals in the first game of the season, but they have locked things up over the last few weeks. And so when you have that platform with an Higuain in the form he's in, and potentially with a Pozuelo, Bryce Duke, Vasilev's been good, Taylor's been good. They have other pieces in there. Feels like Campagna probably won't be because he's hurt. That to me feels like a playoff team, right? They won't beat themselves, and they've got match winners. And I don't know exactly who NYCFC are. About an hour before this game, they just announced they'll play at Citi Field. Yeah. And like, I get that they've dealt with this before, but come on. Their own players don't know where they're going to play their home games. It just, and without Dyla and without Tati to lean on, it just feels like a lot of question marks. And this is one where I think Miami could find an upset. And I don't think they'll win MLS Cup because I think that the consistency needed for a run is tough. But I don't think they're outclassed stepping on the field against anyone else in the East.
Anyone else in the East?
I mean, Philly's Philly, but I don't think that they'll go into a game against Philly and it'll be ridiculous to think they could win it. And I don't think they'll be intimidated.
That's fair. They won't be intimidated. They've got a few big game players that could come out and say, you know what, this is just the Philadelphia Union. But this Philadelphia Union team is, I don't know, incredible is the word. I don't want to like overstate them right now, but what they've done this year is just so good, and just on both sides of the field. Like they are, I think the most complete MLS team I've seen in the last 5 years.
Yeah, they ended the season with the second best goals against average in MLS history.
Yeah.
They set the record for scoring margin victories in games, and they are one of the highest scoring teams in MLS history. So they are complete, as you said. There was question marks the last few weeks. They dropped 2 straight games to lose control of the Supporters Shield. They obviously bounced back with a big home win against TFC. That means you feel fine about them, that you're back, that you feel like they are who they were at their best stretch this season.
Yeah, I also think that it gets really weird near the end of I know that a lot of people really value the Supporter Shield, and I think that there's a lot of people wanting to win it, but I just think at the end of the season, people are tired. They're trying to like ramp up and gear. Like, I just think things get weird, and I think that them losing to like, what was it, Charlotte 4-0, like that's just a one-off. I think Atlanta's one-off. Like I'm not worried about Philadelphia whatsoever. I'm going to regret this, but I think Philadelphia's going to waltz straight to an MLS Cup final.
I'm not against it. I'd love to go to Philly. I love Philly. So I think it would be cool. We're going to talk to Corey Wray in a little bit about what he's doing at Columbus, what he helped start to build at Toronto as well. I think to award Philly, and I think award's probably not the right word, right? Because they will have earned it. But for the focus and success to be there for Philly is awesome for people like us who care about people who are investing resources and energy and focus on development and growing the pipeline and giving more opportunity to young players, coaches, whatever it is, from different, points of view. It would be really cool to see Philly get that win. Bedoya did return in the last game against Toronto. I think it was 15 minutes, and now they get 9 days off.
Yeah,
which I don't think hurts them because they need Bedoya to get fit. So for them, I thought it was ideal to get the layoff, where maybe for Montreal, you would say, they're playing good soccer. Do you really want the layoff? And I think Montreal will be happy. Orlando, you know what you're going to get from them. If you keep your head and don't get caught up in the outside soccer stuff, I think Montreal are clearly better. Their soccer should be able to beat Orlando. And then NYC Miami coming to your building. You don't have to deal with the high pressing of Red Bull and Cincinnati in the open game. It's a bit more of the soccer I think Montreal wants to play. It feels like their roadmap to at least the Eastern Conference Finals is reasonable, Sean, and there should be belief that they could get at least that far.
Yeah. I feel like the East and the West are like, I know this is the path of Major League Soccer, and you're like, no, it's going to be this team and this team all the way. And then all of a sudden week 1 happens and Orlando and Cincinnati are in the final. But yeah, I think Montreal has everything down this path to be a contender. I still question their back line. That back 3 has had mistakes throughout the year, and they're like self-made mistakes. They're not just like a slip or something. It's like a bad pass and a slip. And I don't know. There's something that really worries me about that back line. And I love Kamal Miller and I love Alistair Johnson, and Camacho and Waterman have done a good job this year. But when I see that line, that could be the falling apart for them. And then also their goalie isn't going to save them games. Like, he'll play them and keep them in a game, but he won't win a game for them. Whereas there's other goalkeepers in this league, like Philadelphia. Like, Philadelphia has the best goalkeeper in the league. They have the best defense in the league. So yeah, I think that they're going to do well. I think they're going to go far. And could they win it all? Yes. But I still question that back line. Am I crazy? Is that their weakness right now?
I don't think so. I think goalkeeper, yes. And I think that's 100% fair. And Pantemis has big mistakes in him. And I do think the margins for Montreal are not so tight, but tight enough that a big mistake from him to go down 1-0 or lose a lead or cut a lead in half could kill their playoff hopes or, their playoff run. Yeah. But I trust their back line. And I actually think the flexibility they have is huge, because we always forget with teams, the great moments they have, that you're never starting your best 11 every game in big games.
Yeah.
And the fact that they do have Camacho who can step in. They have Alistair Johnston who can play 2 or 3 spots. Obviously, my favorite player in MLS, Matthew Chenier, who can play 5 different spots. And up top too, right? Kai's an option. Toy's now getting healthy. The big question mark for me is Romel Kyoto.
Yeah.
Yeah. If he's not healthy, I worry about goal scoring more than I worry about defense for them. And it will become hand in hand, because when they are pushing for goals, all of a sudden Kamal Miller becomes, a center mid, and Alistair Johnson becomes a center forward. And that's where they will get exposed defensively and they can get hurt. And the only thing that could change is if Georgie plays the way he played at the beginning of the year, he was good enough to carry people. And you have this ace up the sleeve that's Ismail Kone. And no one can tell you what it's going to look like in a big game, but he's capable of just pure magic that can shift a game, which is sometimes what takes you over the top in playoffs when, 65 minutes, we know who you are, you know who we are, no one has any way to break through, and Kone is capable of just something that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, completely. That's the really fun thing about them, is that they do have those X factors that can come out of nothing. But one thing that you sort of said, what I laugh about thinking about us talking, let's say April, May, and if we're okay, Montreal, top of the table, they're going for it. Romel Kyoto needs to be the goal scorer. You're oh gosh, but no, it's a wild season. What a wild 6 months can do for somebody's career.
It absolutely is. And I don't think we'll put it in proper context, but we should after the year. This is an absurd season for Montreal. Everything we said about Philly, they were 2 points behind.
I know.
They won 11 games on the road. Georgie was the MVP frontrunner and then missed 3 months. And they actually improved their points per game after he got hurt. There are so many things about this team that just absolutely don't make sense and have been so impressive, and they should be complimented. And I don't know how long it'll last. Georgie already has been sold. Victor Wanyama came out. He said, "This is it for me. I'm not going to be here next year." So the DNA of this team will be gone. Let's finish off here in MLS talk. Do you want to put any picks down? Any guarantees?
Yeah. Yes. I'll go finals. I'll put my money where my mouth is. Nashville, Philadelphia final. I'm not going to say who wins, but Nashville. I think Nashville's going to make it. I think we've all seen Mukhtar go wild this year, and I think he's going to continue to push forward and really claim that he is the most valuable player in the league.
I don't hate those picks. And reminder, Nashville lost in PKs in Philly last year in the Eastern Conference semifinals. So there's already a good little bit of grit to that matchup. I have Galaxy brain myself, I think, over the last few days. Not LA Galaxy brain.
Oh, I got excited.
The phrase Galaxy brain. I'm really high on FC Dallas. I think they are a complete team. Yeah, I'm really high on. I'm actually more worried about home against Minnesota than I am on the road against Austin in the second round, because I do think young teams, it's one to like go in and be like, the crowd's against you, no one believes in you, just go get it, versus like, you should win. You're expected to win. The crowd's here for you. Like everything's in your favor. The young players have played really well. If you remember 2020 at Portland, obviously COVID, no crowd, but 2019, they played Seattle off the field in the first round, went to extra time, lost in that one. So the young players have experience. Sebastian Lletget is a huge add at this point, and he fits in correctly. Quignon's starting. He's playing well. Martin Pass has been underratedly one of the best goalkeepers in MLS. Velasco's back and healthy. It'll fall on Velasco and Jesus Ferreira, a lot of it. Those are two really young players. They may not be ready. I can accept that and understand that. But on paper, I think they have a lot of the pieces, and I think they're on the right side of the bracket. Like,
yeah, yep.
LAFC, Galaxy, Nashville, right? Your favorites, the Supporter Shield winners, and Ricky Puig and Push and Chicharito are all going to have to play each other. And you have to beat Minnesota, who had won one game of their last 8.
Yeah.
And you have to potentially go drive to Austin. You don't even have to fly to play one game or host RSL. So I just think it all set up really well for them to get to that conference finals.
That's fair.
You accept it? You're okay with that?
I'm okay with it. At first I was like, oh, you have lost it, because I just can't see anyone, but they might just beat themselves out. That group of LAFC, LA Galaxy, and Nashville, they're going to punch each other in the face. It'll be fun.
And if anyone beats LAFC, Dallas hosts.
Yeah. Right. So here's the question that we were big on Austin all season long.
Mm-hmm.
What's happened to us? Why are we like, Austin could lose to RSL? Are they that team that we just think might just fold?
It is hard without proof to trust teams that play possession and have a specific way on the ball and expose themselves to win must-win games. Like, you're never, even with Man City in Champions League, right? You're never going to believe that until you see it. With defensive teams, it's like, oh, well, you don't know. Wigan could beat anyone, right? On their day, if the set piece falls correctly, Steve Bruce is available again. Like, that will always have that cliche where on the other side, you're almost guilty until proven innocent in that way. So it's definitely going to be, or it's definitely hard to convince someone until you've seen it go down. But all of these games are going to be great. The atmosphere for Austin's first ever playoff game at Q2 is going to be electric as they host RSL. So we've got great games coming up all weekend. Before we get out of here in MLS talk, we already have had a coaching vacancy come open since decision day. In less than 24 hours, the Columbus Crew have let Caleb Porter go. You've heard it on this show a lot. They've given up a record amount of points from winning positions, but especially from the, I believe, 90th minute on. Like, mind-blowing. They did it again on decision day. They did it again last Wednesday. They overall gave up 4 points in those 2 games, which would have taken them not just into the playoffs. I think it would have taken them to a home game. That's how big a gap that was. So Caleb Porter let go after winning MLS Cup in 2020. Sean, are you shocked? What's sort of your reaction to this and where Columbus goes now?
Yeah, I obviously we had talked about, is Caleb going to be, like, if they don't make it, is he going to be fired? And I sort of had this on the back burner, but then, like, looking at it, the only time they've made the playoffs with Caleb Porter was the year that they went on a heater and won. And even then it was like, once again, it was fantastic, but like 1 year out of 4 that they made the playoffs. And after seeing the team capitulate so much in the last 15 minutes, something needs to change. And once again, we're going to talk to Corey about a little bit about this, but just knowing that Tim Bezbatchenko and Caleb Porter came at the same time, it wasn't Tim's guy. And so holistically, you want to have sort of a vision all the way through. And so it might have just made sense for a clean break. They've got themselves a good team. And I thought if they ever got on a run, they could have been a team that I'd be talking about in the same breath as Nashville. But here we are now.
If they had made the playoffs, they would have stepped on the field, and let's just say they played Montreal in the first round. They probably would have the best center forward on the field, and probably the best 10, and probably the best player, right? Like, Cucho is probably the best player between those two rosters combined. So you're right in terms of that. It clearly got stale. Clearly, Caleb Porter couldn't change things. And when one thing is the issue a whole season, then I think you just look at it and say, we have to start over. We have to shift something, and you're not going to get rid of 23 players. It's easier to get rid of the coach. You mentioned it. He was brought in at the same time as Tim Bezbatchenko. He wasn't brought in by Bez, which is always awkward in any sporting scenario. On that side of things, I've brought up Jason Bent as someone who I wonder how involved he can be here. He was the TFC2 coach. He's now Greg Vanney's assistant at the LA Galaxy. Obviously comes from that Toronto FC sort of background where pretty much the entire Columbus front office comes from, at this point, Corey, Issa, as well as Bez. I brought up the joke about Robin Fraser, but I don't know. I mean, if you're him, you just sign a contract extension, but how much is Columbus willing to give up to Colorado? And would he be willing to do it? I don't know. And do any other names sort of stick out to you?
Yeah, that's when I think about it. I don't know if the Rolodex is going to be like guys you've worked with already. I just think that I think Robin's an interesting one, especially because it seems like Columbus has a little bit more of a budget for a team and a better setup, and sort of sets him up for it. So that's an interesting one. I don't know if Jason is up, like is in. He'll probably have an interview and a sit through, but I don't know if that's. I think that the crew might go in with experience, and I don't think that they're going to start with somebody who's a little green. That's the gut I have right now. So I think that the crew have put in so much investment in the front office and the new stadium, and gone out and got it like very good designated players, that I think that they want to match that investment with a manager. And so once again, I don't know who it is. Greg Berhalter doesn't make sense, but
I don't think he would take it.
No, neither do I. But I'm just saying like that, but that's like not him, but somebody of that like level and that sort of like aura around him. I just don't think it would be Greg Berhalter, but that's sort of the level I think they're going to go out and get. Like if Bob Bradley was available a year ago, like I think of like Jason Kreis 7 years ago.
Sean, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
You're struggling to come up with the name because they don't exist right now. And that's the issue. The only name who fits what you're saying right now is Caleb Porter.
It's true.
Like, quite honestly, right? When you look across the landscape, there is no one who is experienced, has cachet, and is available or will probably become available around MLS circles that, exists. Even Luchi Gonzalez. If you're saying he has that little bit of Greg Berhalter magic dust, he already has his job lined up. I don't think Anthony Hudson's that guy. So it's just, it doesn't feel like that person exists. And now you're in a situation where, okay, do I sort of try and get the cheap cut rate version of that? And do I lean into a Wilmer Cabrera or, I don't know, someone like that who might be available for obvious reasons? Or at that point, do you say, well, I'm just going to trust talent over experience and get someone that I think is smart and special? And that person might be in their club right now with Laurent Courtois, who just won MLS Next Pro Championship. The first one ever. They led the league in goals scored. They also led the league in least goals conceded. They won the final 4-1 against the St. Louis City SC team, team that had multiple players who are going to be a part of their expansion team, as well as like TAM level players. So it was a pretty tough game for them to win. And he did it with young pieces, which I think this crew team can build through. We'll talk to Corey Wray about that in just a moment, the general manager of Crew 2, as well as the assistant general manager of Columbus Crew as well. So that one will be coming up right after the break. All right, let's get into our interview now with maybe the most special guest we have ever had on this show, a good friend of all of us here at AFP. He is the assistant general manager of Columbus Crew, and he is the general manager of Columbus Crew 2. Corey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys very much for having me. Very excited to be here.
So, Corey, let's start with congrats. You are the first ever champions of MLS Next Pro. How does championship feel on this fine morning?
Thankfully, this interview is on Tuesday. I think on Sunday morning, it was feeling a little bit rough, and then faded a bit to Monday. But I feel much better after the celebrations on Saturday. So it was a good night.
You've won a couple titles. For anyone who doesn't know, former front office member of Toronto FC, longtime member of Toronto FC, then moved to Columbus, won an MLS Cup there, and now here winning MLS Next Pro. Do you have any tips, levels of expertise that you've learned on what what to do after you win?
I think I gave it to myself on Saturday was to enjoy it, right? I think, despite some of the successes that certainly I've had, and there's been now a few, I almost went home and just lied on my couch and I had to convince myself, that you shouldn't take these things for granted by any means, and it's important to get everybody together to appreciate, the experience. And I think I listened to myself, regretfully so, the next day. And I dove right into it head first, and I had a really good time with a lot of the staff, and, made sure everybody had a really good night. And I think that's what it's all about, to reflect, all the hard work and the times we had this year. I mean, there was nothing and then there was a cup. So it happened pretty quickly, but that takes a lot of effort and dedication and hard work. And so I think it's right to really get everyone together and have a great night out of it. And that we definitely did.
Yeah, Corey, you had sort of mentioned that obviously, like last time this year, there wasn't really this. And going into sort of this year at MLS Next Pro, what was sort of your vision in regards to what the league was going to be like? And sort of then now at the end, looking back after the first year, was it everything that you thought it was going to be? Where were there changes? I know it's a loaded question, but like from where you were a year ago looking at MLS Next Pro to where you are today, was it the full experience?
For sure. There's a couple things that maybe people didn't know. But originally, when I came here, we had discussions about where the second team's even going to fit. At the time, there wasn't even an MLS option. And so we were looking, in USL, where we had previous experience with Toronto FC too, and tried to figure things out in that way. And because of the pandemic, they really pushed things back a little bit. And so I definitely had a lot of time to reflect on, what it could look like. And of course, being in a league, that helps when you're planning a roster. And so when it did become apparent that we were able to put something together, we kind of came together with a number of teams that didn't have a second team last year. And we ran a pilot program. And that pilot program just gave us friendlies against, New York City, Orlando City. We played Philadelphia Union. We played Chicago Fire. And we were able to see what we had internally in a couple different phases. The first was with our collegiate efforts. The Columbus Crew has historically sent a number of kids to college. And so there was a ton of kids out there in that ecosystem that I was not familiar with, and that allowed us to evaluate that group of players. And then what we did is we also had our best academy kids in at the time from our 19s, and we put them together to see the different levels. And then finally we ran the program as just an academy only kind of option with maybe a couple trialists and see what that looked like. And so we were able to really test out where we stood. And frankly, we found that there was a really big need for more talent underneath in that group. Either the group was too young and not ready for the level, or we were just missing, a lot of different profiles and opportunities for guys to do well. Is very different than in Toronto, where we were able to build a group out of the local talent, and definitely take our licks, but provide them with, we had so many different profiles. You could build a team over the span of, a few years. Well, here you might have a few really good players, and then the supporting group definitely wasn't going to be able to compete. I think one of our last couple of games we played the Philadelphia Union, we lost 6-0. And I think at that time, Laurent, he thought he was going to get fired before he even got hired. And he said, no, this is perfect. This gives us every opportunity to evaluate where we're at. We see where guys are. And we know that the Philadelphia Union are, the standard in terms of quality when it comes to their academy and what they do underneath with their pathway. And so it gave us a really good idea of what we could be if we go out and recruit the right level of talent. And so that's kind of where it ended with that phase. And then what we expected, I think, what changed quite a bit. Even leading into the first week, we didn't really know a whole lot about how each group was preparing. I had a number of conversations with everyone, but I think the league caught up quickly enough to some of the challenges in terms of staffing, and obviously the people that were supporting the league itself was all being hired at the same time that we were building a team. So there were some early bumps, but after that, I felt like it really grew into a really strong competition. And I think any teams that, underestimated what some of the quality of the teams would be, quickly tried to remedy that, and tried to sign some guys in the summer and provide us with some really good games to end the year. So it course corrected pretty quickly.
You've already leaned into a few of the topics we want to dig into with, especially the Canadian presence on this team. But
sure,
you mentioned running TFC2. I know that was League One Ontario for some time, but USL for a lot of time. Before we get to this specific team, I want to ask about the two leagues. What are the differences? And I think there was some fear, I know from some people I talked to, about, USL, you go and play the New Mexicos, the Louisvilles of the world, senior teams that have senior experience players, as well as those atmospheres. And there's a worry about what MLS Next Pro will be up against that in terms of for development. And so I'm just curious what you thought of this year and sort of the differences, advantages or disadvantages of this setup now for the development pipeline here in North America.
Yeah, I think, look, we were in the early days of the transition of the USL in the championship, and it was certainly not what it is now. And so, understanding that they've then built off of, the league partnership with MLS, and they've grown with great ownership groups and built fan bases, and they put a ton behind their, sales and marketing. So I wasn't expecting us to be at that level by any means in the first year of something that was just, launching. So the differences are clear. You aren't able to come up against as many of those teams. And certainly there is a fan base that is probably just starting out in terms of understanding what these teams are all about. But the potential is there. So for a couple years, if you're missing that, okay, that's not great. But I also wouldn't say that every player would be necessarily only playing in Next Pro over the course of the next few years in their pathway. And I don't see why there isn't an opportunity to throw a player into the USL Championship if there's, a really good fan base or maybe an older group that they can benefit from, or that someone's blocked in terms of their pathway here. So it's about using each level. But I do understand the arguments of not being able to play against some of those older teams, but it depends on the level of resistance that the players need in your group. And while that would be great for us, it's certainly, I felt like we had enough, I guess. Well, maybe we didn't have enough because we did so well, but there were certainly games that provided us with challenges, and there was rosters week in and week out that changed because of, the home team putting down some really talented play. I mean, the first game we played, Inter Miami had Emerson carve us to shreds, and that was a $2 million plus investment. And so you're definitely not getting that in USL. And so there was players that, have really good MLS experience, or young players that needed, some more consistency that we're playing against. That on the flip side, I definitely would never have seen that in USL against some of these other teams. So there's definitely give or take. We never expected it to be like the USL Championship. But we did want to make sure that the games were, of a professional nature, provided our guys with opportunities to showcase themselves and put them in situations to learn. And I got to say, we definitely got that out of this season.
Keeping up with sort of that, David had mentioned, like the Canadian conversation. I think something that made a bit of waves earlier in the season was your guys signing Mo Farsi to a deal, and sort of having the fans have that conversation of is that the pathway that most players are going to go, and how is it going to continue? What is it about this Canadian Premier League that, like, do you feel like you guys were the only ones sort of not watching, but like scouting and looking to see that as an opportunity for Next Pro? Or do you think, or is there a lot of people keeping their eye on it from the developmental side?
I think clearly your Vancouvers, Montreals, and Torontos are pretty aware of it. There's been a couple USL teams that have moved a player or two over the last couple of years, but certainly I don't know about the overall in-depth scouting that's going on with some of the other USL teams. I don't know why. As a Canadian and someone who's very familiar with it, the quality is great, and the structure and the games they get. So should there be more people looking at it? Of course, and that's up to them how they allocate their scouting resources. But for me, it was really clear to see that there's players who've been given an opportunity, to compete in a team that, has to win each week and has to perform in front of, crowds and have things on the line that can benefit from then moving from there to here in terms of everything else, right? Behind the scenes, what does the training look like? The facilities, the nutrition, the sports performance, like that's the stuff that we're able to put around these guys that maybe they don't have the resources in the CPL to do, consistently for a number of reasons, but they do get the game side of there. So we felt like we could put, someone like Mo in this situation, expose them to first team trainings, give them the necessary additional resources and let them fly. And I think that was the sales pitch from me. It was difficult again because there was no league. So I was like, forget the league. Like, look at everything else we have here, right? Like we're going to surround you with everyone else and we'll see what the league looks like. But the games, what we spoke to most of the guys, the games are like the icing on the top of your development cake, and the rest of it behind you. We're not looking game by game for those benefits. We're looking, month by month, and by the end of the year, where do you stand? And so that was kind of a different approach for him. We're going to try to make you better in certain areas, and we're going to build off of that so that it's more individualized. And I think that for someone, knowing you're going to put something into that player, and definitely full credit to Tommy and those guys at Calvary. They took him and made him, young player of the year, but there was a little bit more that could even go deeper into what Mo needed, where he's not necessarily, just preparing for games and trying to win each week. We're clearly trying to do well and stick to the process, but we could really focus on a little bit more for him and give him the opportunity to showcase himself. So again, the player, there's Canadians and there's Americans and there's players. We're looking for good players with potential, and it just so happens that maybe I have a bit more comfort in that market, but those are definitely good players, and they're being given opportunities. So the question would be, why wouldn't we look there? And so that's maybe a little bit different for us than other teams, but also, having a little bit of history, in and around that program and being able to, be pretty comfortable. Maybe that gave us a little bit of an advantage, but I certainly got a lot of text after we signed them saying good signing from MLS teams. So clearly people are watching. It's just about, convincing the player of the right project after that.
You obviously, when I look at your roster, when I look at your team, you sort of mentioned what you saw last year when you saw the players that you had available to you through the Columbus Crew Academy and whatnot, some of the deficiencies. And I know I've spoken with you and your new academy director and Tim Bezbachenko and everyone else about sort of the work you guys are doing to try and catch Columbus up from an academy point of view. That always takes time. It feels like you found this in-between space of a way to bridge the gap by signing some homegrowns from other teams, signing players like a Mo Farsi who are out there but still young that can develop. It feels like you found this good middle ground where you had Parente and Zawadzki who are always going to be sort of the core of this team, and Schulte who you draft. But then the way you built the rest of this roster, it feels very unique but also very purposeful.
100%. The gap was too big. And we had an opportunity on the first team with the roster, probably being one of the older rosters, to start to really fill that next level of 20 to 22 years old. I'd say 19 to 23, underneath that, and then have the academy, start to rebuild under there from, U12, U13, all the way up to that. So knowing that each stage is going to take time, we probably couldn't really just throw out a U19 Academy Plus team. It didn't make any sense. And so that gap in between gave us the opportunity to connect those guys who have first team potential that could roll into the first team over the next year or two, which is exactly the ages we need. And also, the most important thing was to create an environment for those next group of young academy players so they could actually see, what it should be like when they do get there, or when they're actually called upon, to influence matches in that. And I think that was a big learning from my time and our time in Toronto, was that while they were super talented young guys, they were all looking at each other for, what do I do? How do I keep the standard every day? And it's not their fault, but we're able to produce a group here that is, guiding through their actions, guiding through their experiences. A lot of them were pros somewhere, right? At least they've gone through their first year being a pro. They have some lessons behind them. And so that was a really purposeful kind of group of players that we brought in to develop the environment so that then the next group, when they're ready, could be ready to pass that kind of advice down to then the next level. So we didn't have that, and it was a huge glaring need within the group. And I think we already have seen a lot of benefits. While we've had some young guys pop in and make appearances here and there, they're really going to be tasked next year to really start to fill in the depth spots, and then slowly but surely age into a competitive roster, by year 3 or 4. So it's definitely intentional. It's all lined up with what we were missing, and certainly it went better than we expected, but it made sense when you put it on paper. It made sense. Like when you explain it to me, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And that's exactly what we did.
Speaking of development, just in an overall, like where do you feel Major League Soccer's development growth is right now compared to, let's say, the rest of the world? And then also, like, what do you think that the crew are doing now that's sort of pushing the boundaries and trying to innovate? Is there anything that your team's doing that's a bit different?
Yeah, for sure. So MLS, I think it's pretty well documented, the increase of, I guess, young players moving through the pathway and out of the league. And I think that has been kind of happening behind the scenes. Certainly Dave's been at a lot of youth tournaments with me and seen the scouts and agents and everybody growing in size. And I think that has been happening over the last, 4 to 5 years, where when it used to show up, there'd be a couple, and now there's, every German club is represented. You got the English Premier League clubs there. You have, Spanish clubs now, and you're starting to see a real big interest in the league. And so in terms of the change over the years, that's been massive, because it certainly, if I could speak from a Canadian perspective, I think probably 4 or 5 years ago, I went on a trip to try to market and promote even just the idea that Canada has good young soccer players. And I think that didn't go so well. And so I came back a little bit distraught. But it was clear that, I could see that we did. And it was clear that things were slowly starting to change underneath, thanks to a lot of the academies and obviously the participation and all those things aligning. But I had conversations with, youth sporting directors where the same old cliches, I thought you guys are hockey players. I don't think we'd be very interested in those players coming in over for a trial. And now, especially in my conversations with agents, in that it's like a hot commodity, right? I want the next, Alfonso Davies. I want the next David. I want all, of course, now it's easy for them to understand that, but of course now it's way more expensive. And so, you try to help people as much as you can. And obviously being a proud Canadian, I was doing, the good work for the country, but I did believe, and I think a lot of people that were there knew that these kids could play and they can hang. And it's been, well documented now that there's definitely an opportunity, whether it's American or Canadian, for those players in the best leagues in the world. And it just requires people to give them a chance. And I think that's been happening, and people are much more comfortable spending that money. I think now it's been clear that while it is more money, it's still a good avenue if you're looking for maybe some bargains versus some other countries. And at the end of the day, the coaching has improved. The education for the coaches has improved. The facilities, as you guys know, they're unbelievable. Like when we sit here and talk about in Ohio alone, the training grounds and stadiums that these two clubs have. Never in my wildest dreams would I have ever imagined in Ohio that would be the
Yeah.
place you would see facilities like that. And so that's happening across the US.
You guys play MLS Next Pro in an MLS stadium, and there's a second MLS stadium in your
We
market.
have another one. Yeah. It's incredible the growth over the years, certainly that we've all seen. And so that all underneath these things that take a little bit of time, it all contributes. And I think you start to catch up really quickly. And then finally, the players are so professional in their approach. I mean, they are. I don't think we have a lot of the issues of guys being paid too much and just being not kind of respectful to their coaches. All the problems that plague youth soccer over in some of the top countries where they're superstars at such an early age. Well, we have some of that. I don't think the players are necessarily at that level yet where they're not going to listen to whatever the coach says. They don't want to do the extra gym work and stuff. These guys are so professional from a young age. In fact, they're very boring because they're so dedicated to the game. I mean, I'm sitting there waiting, for a kid to sneak out or something, and the one thing you might do is, drink an extra Gatorade or something. It's incredible that these guys are so dedicated, and it really goes a long way when you're investing in a young player. You're not going to have a lot of problems, and I think that's a big deal as well. So Canadian, US, these players, they want it. And at the end of the day, you can kind of count on now maybe more of a brand where they're going to do whatever it takes once they get over there as well. And they're not maybe as swayed by some of the other things that come along with the fame. And so that these guys have now been able to establish themselves in the biggest leagues in the world. I'm not surprised.
You mentioned opportunity. It's not just opportunity for players. One of the things we always talk about is opportunity for team admins and athletic trainers and general managers and coaches, right? More jobs to get that experience. You guys went with Laurent Quarta in year one. Laurent, excuse me. He obviously fairly successful throughout the regular season and then into the championship. What was it about him that sort of you guys leaned on as the guy to start this whole process for you? And then what's the thought process in terms of what success at MLS Next Pro could mean to the next level, especially at a club where there's now a head coaching vacancy in Major League Soccer?
Yeah, for sure. So Laurent, clearly a pretty great playing resume. Played for some big clubs in England and Spain. I think that's pretty well documented. What was really unique about him is he came to MLS. He had a couple experiences in MLS with some coaches that I think we all know pretty well in terms of Greg and Robin, and he was able to really understand what a second team setup could be like when he was like a player coach in LA. And then things changed there, and they went a different direction with the whole, group underneath. And he was looking for something different. And he was here in Columbus as an academy coach and wanted to, just learn and try to grow as a person. I think that's the most unique thing about him is his humility and his desire to learn more. And he could go the complete other way given his background, and he could be a completely different person based on, experiences I've had. And he's super humble and just hungry to learn and very open-minded. And I think when we watched how he did a lot of his sessions and what his games looked like in the academy, it was clear that there was a vision for how he wanted to play within, the constructs of the academy. And it was clear that he was doing things that were aligned with the way in which we all saw the game here from Tim down. And so we consider this, and I think, Sean mentioned, what we're doing differently or how we see things in the club. This is a pathway, for everyone. And it's the same thing you mentioned, Dave. This is a pathway for staff and for the players, but also for the coaches. And so if we can put those guys in a place to be protected and to make mistakes and also to try things out, I think you can get a really good growth in a person. And I think he was surprised at how much we were going to support him and his ideas, as crazy as he thought they were, and how much we would stand behind them regardless of, what it looked like, even as far as, the semifinals of the goalkeeper getting, chipped from half. It was something we agreed to from the very beginning. And we were going to expose the guys. And so we talk about like Laurent and the opportunity here. He's still a very new coach, but someone we believe in a lot and someone we're going to support as much as possible. And so, in terms of where we see the club going and that, I think you'll probably see more ideas similar to what we've been doing underneath, with the academy and second team. And certainly Laurent is someone we're going to lean on, to definitely, get a lot of those concepts, I guess spread as much as possible. And certainly, we have an opening, and I think he'd be someone we're going to speak to, a number of times throughout the process and give him a chance to even solidify maybe some more of his thoughts when it comes to a first team level, and then go from there. But it is his first, kind of real pro job, and so there are some things we're still hoping to advance with him day to day. But what a tremendous prospect for us to have in our organization, and that's again the investment and the different side of things we're trying to do is really, really grow a pathway from top to bottom in every single position and not just players. And if we can do that, then you start to really set things up for succession rates and things like that within the club, where we can really continue on despite, people getting promoted, people getting plucked, people moving elsewhere. If we can establish that, cycle, I think that is something unique for us, where we're Columbus. We can't just go out and pay for everything and be the top spenders. We're not going to do that. So if we can really hone in on our resources, which are our people and our players and obviously all our facilities, I think that will give us the edge that we need. And that's a little bit more unique to us as well versus some of the other teams that, have other avenues of doing things. So the final piece is for us. I guess it's trying to be as innovative as possible. And so, when we talk about the people and all that, to have someone like Laurent who buys into, some ideas that we have on the game and the way we see things, I think that will be something we're looking for, for the rest of the time that we're here is like-minded people in that area. And I have to give, Caleb credit. He did whatever he could to get the results. And so it's not by any means a knock on anything he did, but the alignment from top to bottom is what we're really looking for. And I think that will be a little bit more apparent as we move forward. And I think that's something that will really give us an edge, as much as we can get here in Columbus.
Corey, I could do this all day. We could talk scouting networks. We could talk Caleb Borneo and Jackson Linmore. We could talk, development so much. It's my favorite, and we appreciate you coming on. Congratulations again on the victory. We look forward to what is in your future as well. You are the first ever general manager to win an MLS NEXT Pro Cup. So you got that under your belt, but a lot more we know to come. And we always love having you on the show. We always love talking to you. So congratulations and thanks again.
And welcome back. It's now time for Ask AFP, where myself and David do the best to answer all your questions. Thanks to everyone who sent in their questions through our Patreon Discord as well as Twitter. Obviously, with Devang not here, I'm going to jump in and answer some of these questions. So, David, you get to ask the first question.
All right, let's go. And we'll go straight to your heart. S. McGinnis asks, do Gareth Bale's poor performances with LAFC change your outlook for Group B at the World Cup? Gareth Bale, your hero, stumbling, tripping on his face in Major League Soccer. Sorry, this is editorial. S. McGinnis didn't write this. Sean, how do you feel about Wales?
Honestly, and this is the silliest thing I'm going to say, but I don't think Gareth Bale's LAFC performance is going to change how Gareth Bale is going to perform at the World Cup. Over the last 4 or 5 years, Gareth Bale has sort of been, quote unquote, not performing at a high level on his club teams, but any time that they call for him at Wales, he is the star of the team. He is the captain. He is the leader. If there's a penalty that needs to be had, he's taking it. If there's a free kick, he's scoring it. I think that it's bad for LAFC that Gareth Bale isn't putting out a good performance because that's bad. But I do not question Gareth Bale's skill level and what he's going to bring for Wales at the World Cup. He is going to score against the United States.
Nice. I appreciate that. I can understand that he's better playing for Wales because of the way they play and what's asked.
Yeah.
Right. They don't open up the game. They don't open up the field. Like, it's just have your moments of brilliance, take free kicks, and that's it.
Yeah.
I can get that. I think as a USA fan, I'd still be more intimidated if he was playing well right now and playing a lot. I probably feel now like I did when the draw happened, which was confident, but it would be less so if he was playing better. It doesn't really change my views. I feel I'm a little bit lower. Actually, I don't even know where I feel with Iran. They obviously have a ton going on off the field, both in a soccer sense with the coach being fired and Queiroz being brought back, and then obviously with the protests and everything that's going on. And the players have been really involved with that, and they've promoted a lot of the protesting, which is rare for Iran. So I don't know what the feeling in that camp and how the FA treats them. Like, that's such an unknown. And obviously England sucks. So I still kind of feel like how I felt at the beginning, but I do think it's a more chaotic group than people realized when the draw happened, if that's fair.
Yeah, I just can't believe that the United States are gonna fall to Gareth Bale and Harry Kane one by one. It's just gonna be a fantastic group stage.
It's gonna be great for you. And when it doesn't go well, like the North London Derby didn't, and like the Blue Jays series didn't, don't come crying to me because you made this bad.
I know. Moving on, we got another Discord question. This one's from Jason G. He posted the link of Merritt Paulson stepping down as CEO of the Portland Thorns and the Timbers. You guys touched on this last week as well. Final thoughts on sort of the Merritt Paulson stepping down?
It's more than I expected.
Yeah.
It's not enough in terms of change and punishment. Rarely are rich people held to the proper level of punishment. And unfortunately, rarely are the people who are victims in this situation properly protected. The only thing that I can think of as, I don't want to call it a silver lining, but a potential, is Merritt Paulson's not going to sell the Portland Timbers because it's his identity and it's his entire success.
Yeah.
He didn't make his money. He doesn't have a business. Like, his dad is the money, and he got him to give him enough to buy this team at a really cheap level, which when people ask about making money and selling, like his, the jump that's happened in MLS since he bought in, he's going to make $400 million minimum. It's not like he bought Charlotte last year or Nashville 3 years ago. Like, he bought in MLS 1.0. I guess the hope would be if he's not involved anymore, if he's not involved day to day, if he's not around, maybe he feels less of that and it becomes less fun for him and he doesn't want it anymore. That's the most you're looking for, which is all depressing and all unfortunate. But I think that's kind of the reality that we sit in.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head on that. It is. I didn't expect it. I'm glad it is happening. And I'm glad that there's a little bit more repercussions for this stuff. But yeah, we just need to see more action in this kind of stuff and not having it happen. Like similar is happening. I don't know how much you've been following, but the Hockey Canada stuff over here. We just had the CEO of Hockey Canada finally step down after some serious complaints about sexual assault and hazing as well. So once again, it's the first step. It's not the final step, but hopefully these things continue to get cut out prior to things happening. And so, yeah, it's the sad part of the sport.
All right, let me ask you now from Gonzo the Beast on Ask AFP, how many York United players move in the offseason?
It's a tough question because I think if prior to having conversations with like Charlie and Mitchell from CanPL's website, I would have said I think Di Rosario would probably looking to move on because I think he's had a heck of a year. He's still young. But I think that this team might hold on for a little bit longer. I think that they saw a lot of turnover during the season, that I think that they saw sort of the benefit of everything and also the ability to hold on just for a full season. They might get attendance up. They might get things going forward, and they might make the playoffs, which would be huge for them. So it wouldn't shock me if Di Rosario does move. Because he's very hard to find a young, cheap 6'2" goal scorer in North America. But at the same time, I think that the price is going to be higher than what maybe it was 3 months ago. So I don't expect anyone. I expect this core to sort of stick around York United.
So you mentioned making the playoffs. Playoffs will begin. Obviously, York won't be a part of it this weekend. We've got 2-leg semifinals coming up. No away goals in these, which is something to note. Cavalry hosting Forge in leg 1, Pacific hosting Ottawa in leg 1. So those two teams obviously will reverse for the second leg. Big thoughts going into this?
I am so glad how it all fell apart, that Cavalry and Forge get each other in the first round. It's just the one thing that I really like to see is just this constant rivalry get brought up, and it's this natural thing. And I feel like it's something that's, as Major League Soccer gets bigger, it's not happening enough anymore. And that like, there's just not these constant rivalries that you get to see, and it just grows and they hate each other. And like, I think this will be a really interesting one. And I'm licking my lips, and I'm once again not picking sides, but I think Cavalry might take it in this one and really sort of stick it to them. And then it's up to them to finally do what they haven't done before, and that's convert. But that they're both exciting. Like Atleti Ottawa has done the damn thing. They won the regular season. They did what nobody thought they were going to do, except for one Devang Desai. But they're playing the champions, a team that's done it before. They might be a little undermanned, but once again, like, both games are mouthwatering and really fun, and I'm excited. I'm looking to maybe head up to Hamilton to go watch a game. We'll see.
Oh, nice.
I haven't been to a Forge match yet, so I think I might go and see it, because once again, I'm literally amped for these matches. So I'm excited. What do you think? How are you feeling?
It's fun. Well, one, it's cool that you get to sort of see what the first leg was to see if you want to go.
Yeah.
It would be very fitting to me. I'm obviously a Knicks fan, so this isn't fun for me, but the famous documentary that then came out, and just the story of, Reggie Miller finally beat the Knicks. Yeah. And then they lost to the Bulls, where it's like, if Cavalry finally get over Forge, but then they don't win the final because it's not the final, that would be unfortunate for them and ridiculous. I guess I would say, and it's different. It's basically the polar opposite of what we said about Austin. But, the question mark to me is around Ottawa. They are the best team. They have no experience in this space. All three of these other teams have been here, and they've shown they can play well in tight moments. They've shown that they can, sort of rise to the challenge. So that to me is the most interesting part about this, is the new kid on the block is technically the favorite, but I don't know that a lot of people are actually treating them that way going into this. And so to me, that's what I'm focused on, is can Ottawa bring their regular season performances into the playoffs? 2 legs is obviously to their advantage, right? I think you want more soccer it minimizes each mistake, the more soccer that's played. And I think that kind of fits towards them, especially not having away goals where it's like, oh no, you make a mistake early and everything shifts. But I don't know. I'm excited for the playoffs, and it's going to be fun to sort of swap between MLS and CPL playoffs back and forth.
Yeah, and one other thing that it didn't really hit me until now is that there's this arrogance, and it's like a confidence. Actually, they'll call it a confidence because they are the best team. But like what Ollie Bassett brings on the pitch, and the way he celebrates, and the way that like the team walks now with that team, they feel it. And that might be something that it's similar to what the Canadian national team brought. Is that just confidence to believe in themselves, and they're doing it, and they're seeing themselves do these things, that maybe when it comes to a playoff match or a big match, that they're ready to do it. And maybe having Pacific in round one, a team that is sort of floundering, might be the perfect opponent to sort of start, I guess, the journey to get win a series and you're in the final. But yeah, I think that they're set themselves up decent, and I like what they do. They're a fun team to watch. So we'll see. Last question before we go, though, we got one from LS. She asks, if Fonzie and Oso don't recover from their injuries in time for playing for Canada at the World Cup, is it cause for panic, or is there depth enough that the team will have a strong showing without them?
Fonzie feels like a bridge too far.
Agreed. I
think he's the one player. He is the soul. He is the trump card. He is we've got a shot. He's the confidence. From a positional point of view, Tajon can fill in. You could bring Richie into the team. Alistair can play different roles. You could start Kyle Larin and David and, Corbinu, Junior Hoylett. There's ways to cover it positionally. It just feels like from a top end talent point of view, but I think even more an emotional point of view, Fonzie just feels like a little bit too much. And, maybe I'd say the same about Eustachio, but I don't even know that I would.
No,
he feels like the one.
Yeah, I agree. I think if Alphonso Davies there it's especially because of who they're against. They're against at least two powerhouses and then a good team in Morocco that you need to be on your best every single second of that game or they're going to rip you apart. And so if you don't have your X factor or the guy that's going to just turn it on a dime and go, it's tough. And then one last thing before we go though, and it's something that I've been noticing a lot of people sharing articles about, is that Nagelsmann at Bayern Munich is starting to experiment with Alphonso Davies in the center of the park, and how it's happening now. Obviously, he's got the contusion and working through it. But do you think if this happened a little bit earlier, we're having a conversation that he's playing centrally for Canada? Is he still in that conversation to play centrally for Canada? What do you think?
I don't know. I think from what we've seen from Herdman, I think you want to give him as much freedom as you can. So in theory, he is playing centrally, right? Because if he wants to go there, he can.
Yeah.
But you don't want to do it with a ton of responsibility because you want him to go find the game. So maybe as time goes along, he's just so good and having him in your spine is so important. But I think still with this group, especially if Atiba's healthy, right? And he can still play for you where, okay, when Atiba retires, you don't have that quality there.
Yeah.
It just feels like you want a way for Fonzie to just be everywhere. And that, while it in theory makes sense, I think it becomes counteractive to what you're trying to accomplish with him. So, yeah. I was looking at it the other day, I think during the international break, Belgium and Croatia, those are the two big challenges.
Yeah.
On paper, the resume, and by resume, I mean age, clubs, experience for Morocco, blows Canada out of the water. I mean, guys are not talking about start for Sevilla, Getafe, Fiorentina. They've got Bayern Munich players too. So it's just tough.
100%. It's that game's the most important. I know it's at the but it's if they get 3 from that, then it's anything can happen. But that's the game that they need 3 points from. But even that, that's a very tough game. It's the World Cup. When you're probably the 4th seed, it's you're going to have 3 tough games unless you're playing Wales and England and Iran.
And it's Alphonso Davies, the best left back in the world. Hakimi's probably the best right back in the world. It's actually weird how similar the two teams are, but Morocco probably a notch above, which doesn't take it away. I think it actually more to me says I can't think Canada can get 3 points, and I think it can come out of any of these 3 games. I think the challenge is so similar across that it's can you elevate your game one time and then manage the rest of them? And I don't know that my assumption anymore is it's going to be against Morocco. I think Croatia's an equally good opportunity to do that.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, confidence. I'm ending the show with confidence. Not in my picks and not, of course, in any of our sports teams, but in Canada, which I hope will lead us all the way. Thank you so much once again to Corey Wray for joining us. Congratulations on winning the first ever MLS NEXT Pro Cup. Congratulations on all the success they had, the soccer they played, so much more. And of course, we're going to continue to track all the news at the MLS level with Columbus. Enjoy the playoffs, everyone, in the CPL. In MLS, of course, all European soccer will be in the Discord with all of you who are Patreon subscribers, and anyone who's not, patreon.com/afootballpodcast. You want to be there. Now is the time to be there. Thank you to Sean for co-hosting. Shouts to Devang Desai for being out there, as well as Greg on, as he would say, the ones and twos. Have a good one, everyone, and we'll talk to you again next time.